let's take a look at what the postseason would look like right now in the AFC, because it is eye-opening. You start with the Kansas City Chiefs, who get the bye. Sure, whatever, that's fine. But look at the teams right now that are hosting games and might have to go on the road. You got a Dolphins team, a Titans team, a Ravens team that would host games right now in Super Wildcard Weekend. The Bills would have to go on the road. And how about the teams that are out of it right now, including the Chargers and the Bengals, because of tiebreakers against the New England Patriots? Now, if the Chiefs were to lose this upcoming week, and they do have a tough game, that opens up the 1 seed for everybody else again, with the Chiefs going to the Chargers, who are trying to play their way back into the postseason. We're going to have Danny Cannell and Brady Quinn go through the matchups and tell us who they think will advance and eventually come out of the AFC. Let's start with a game where I feel like we get this all the time. The Tennessee Titans are at home, and they would be an underdog against the Buffalo Bills if that was the matchup right now, which it is if the season ended.
Right, and you would hope you would get a better performance out of Ryan Tannehill than the playoff game last year. The way the season ended was one of the reasons his own fan base has turned on him, and they went out and drafted Malik Willis. But I do think with a healthy Derrick Henry, you get a healthy dose of him running the football to try to keep it away from Josh Allen and that offense. But I do think Buffalo, would that be that team then at the 6th seed here that would be more than capable? I think the point spread would probably be at least over 3.5, somewhere in that vicinity, and I might go ahead and lay them with Buffalo. As bad as they've played here in this stretch, I do think this is just a rough patch. I think it's exactly what it is. I think Josh Allen, the further he is removed from this injury that he's going with to his arm, I think you'll start to see them settle down. We have to remember that the NFL is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And if you look last year at the Rams, Super Bowl winning season, they had a three losses in a row stretch where Matthew Stafford threw a lot of interceptions. And this feels like it's that stretch for the Bills. They've got to go out there and play themselves out of it, including Josh Allen has got to stop turning the ball over. I think they'll be fine, and that's what this is. And so in the long run, I think they'll be fine, and they'll be able to go on the road if necessary and get a win in the playoffs.
Boy, these two teams are so different than what they looked like when they matched up in week 2. And I think you can make the case they're not that different. Yeah, I just went and said that. If you look at the Tennessee Titans, they rely heavily on the production of Derrick Henry, and then they supplement the passing game when Ryan Tannehill's in there. And their defense has really come along since that week 2 matchup. If you look at the Buffalo Bills, they rely heavily on Josh Allen to do everything for that offense. And when he's not doing that, they have a harder time running the football. And then they're supplemented by their defense trying to get them off the field. So the reality is it's actually a much better matchup than maybe it was in week 2 as the Titans have come along now and showcased what they're capable of this season. I think this is a tight game. This is one where maybe you even see one of those surprises here in the wild card round, and the Titans could knock off the Buffalo Bills. I'm not going to make that pick. I got the Bills winning a close one, but still, this would be one of the better matchups in the wild card round.
Hard to believe that after all that offseason talk, Bills Super Bowl favorites, you got the MVP favorite going into the season, that they would have to start Super Wildcard Weekend on the road if everything ended today. Still some time for the Bills to make that up. Let's go to the Patriots at the Dolphins. This would be Miami hosting this game as the 2 seed. Remember, beginning last season, only one team in the NFL per league gets a bye. So the Dolphins would have to play Wild Card Weekend.
I think the Dolphins would absolutely own the Patriots at home. And I know Bill Belichick is a great defensive mind, but you just cannot match up with all the weapons that Tua has in the offensive scheme that Mike McDaniel has coming your way. Brady touched on it a little bit. This past weekend, he had 8 different receivers. It wasn't like just Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle were the guys, exploding for 100 yards each. He was spreading the football around. They had 5 receivers with 40 or more yards and 3 or 4 catches at least. They're just so tough to defend sideline to sideline. And the Patriots, to me, are a team that really is kind of struggling to find an identity at quarterback. You've been, it's okay. I'd say it's pretty close to pedestrian, though, with Mac Jones still feeling his way out in the system. I think the Dolphins would just have too much firepower here for the Patriots.
This is another one where I kind of look at it and say, all right, a third time between these two teams, so much familiarity being division foes. Miami does have a bit of a home field advantage, but not quite if this game was obviously up in Foxborough, which it would be in this case. However, I don't know. This one was a toss-up for me. I ended up selecting the home team and giving the edge to Tagovailoa, in part because of some of the talent they have, but also because I think their defense, the addition of Bradley Chubb, and the impact that may make. However, they did just lose Emmanuel Ogbah this past week. And for the Patriots, they have gotten a lot better defensively. Let's not forget a couple weeks ago, 9 sacks versus the Indianapolis Colts. So tough matchup. I've got the Miami Dolphins ended up making it through this one, but don't feel great about it. It's always tough betting against Bill Belichick.
They'll play again week 17. That's New Year's Day in the NFL. So you guys both have the Dolphins and the Bills moving on. Those would be the two favorites in those games, even though the Bills right now would be the 6th seed and the Titans the 3. The 4 versus 5 game is Baltimore hosting the New York Jets, and I'm just not sure many people are going to buy the New York Jets as a playoff winner.
No, I don't think any of us even here would buy the Jets as a playoff team if it weren't for where we're standing right here today. Can they continue the success? I don't think so. If they did, I think you would have to look at the Ravens. And of all the teams that we've discussed right here, I think the Ravens might be one of the more dangerous teams because of how difficult it is to defend Lamar Jackson, because the improvements they made with the defense, with Roquan Smith, that trade they made there on the defensive side of the ball. I think that makes this Ravens team, they're trying to shore up their weaknesses. We know what their identity is on the offensive side of the ball. And Lamar Jackson still playing for that contract, still playing to silence his critics with the lack of playoff success. I think they could come in angry, motivated. I think they would give anybody in this kind of postseason scenario that we've given, I think they would give them fits, but I think they would dominate the Jets. I just don't see the Jets as something that's going to sustain over time. I know it's been a great story, and Robert Saleh keeps collecting receipts, especially with our guy Brady, but I think the Ravens here would have the most of them.
Collecting receipts and charity money from Brady too, right?
Yeah. Well, it's not for not actually for their success, because everyone always thinks I picked them to go 0-9, which wasn't the case. But we'll keep that tail continuing to go while I help charity and all you cheapos out there just continue to not donate. But this is one where look, whether the Jets are a playoff team, it's irrelevant here. I think once they get into the playoffs, that's where some things get exposed. And one in particular is you have a former MVP in Lamar Jackson, and you have Zach Wilson, who I think right now, if you look at their game plan to win football games, they're running the football well, they're playing good defense, and they're trying not to ask Zach Wilson to do too much. And that's their formula for success. Will it sustain itself to allow them to be a playoff team? We'll have to wait and see how the games play out. But this is one where Danny kind of hit the nail on the head. I think Baltimore could be that team that gets in the playoff. No one wants to play them. If they start to get hot, look out. And also, they're a team that's banged up. If they start to get healthy, too, as we get into the second half of the season and start to build momentum, and they're playing their best football in December heading into January, that's another thing to keep an eye on, because they have not been healthy, not only at the running back position, wide receiver position. You can make the case right now that they've been snake bitten as much as any team, and yet they're still in a position right now to be the number 4 team in the playoff seed, at least in the AFC playoff picture right now. So dangerous team. I've got Baltimore obviously winning this one and moving on.
All right, so you guys agree on all 3 of the Super Wild Card matchups. If it were to end today, this is what it would look like, and that's what we're going off of in our AFC playoff picks. So you had the Chiefs getting the bye, and then it's reseeded, so they would get the highest seed that won, and that would be the Buffalo Bills. Not a great draw if you're Kansas City in the first playoff game with the bye.
No, and not a matchup anybody saw coming in the divisional round, right? We all thought it was going to be an AFC championship game. But I'm going to go with the team that won the first time around and potentially had that meaningful win because of what home field could mean here in this circumstance. And if there's one thing I think all of us have come to appreciate, it's just how good Patrick Mahomes is. And I know Josh Allen is a trendy pick, and he's played outstanding for the most part this season. To me, Patrick Mahomes still is what everybody should be trying to attain and what everybody is striving for. And as long as he's healthy, as long as he is playing quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm not betting against him, especially at home at Arrowhead, who is one of the more, one of the louder, tougher places to go in. These guys will deliver. They'll put on a show every time they play against each other. They do. But I'm not going to go against Patrick Mahomes and all that he's got going with that little chip on his shoulder, too, because I think even he was tired of hearing his buddy Josh Allen just christen the next MVP of the NFL. I think Patrick Mahomes wants to say something about this first.
Well, let's not forget, too, Andy Reid off a bye in Arrowhead. I mean, come on. That's an uphill battle. And it's one in which you have to take into account the new overtime rules. Remember, I mean, this game might never end, actually. Like, it might just end up being the 2 teams going back and forth forever, since they now both get an opportunity to if they score a touchdown, the other team still gets an opportunity to possess the ball. So we know how it ended last year. It can't end that way this year because of the new rule. So maybe they're still playing this game come 2023 when the season starts. But to Danny's point, I think the Chiefs are a better football team right now. They're kind of more of a complete team, in my opinion, I don't mean to harp on that too much. When you look at the Buffalo Bills, I think there's some questions about whether or not they can consistently run the football and how big of a role that Josh Allen plays in that. And then at times, I think has to press because of that. But it's tough to pick against the Chiefs at home in this case. I think a tight game, a fun game, probably really what I would deem the Super Bowl. I mean, this will be, to me, the top two teams, the best game in the entire playoff picture, including the Super Bowl. So you might say it's unfortunate to see it in the divisional round. Eventually, these two teams are going to have to play one another. I don't think either one would get upset up to this point. So they're on a collision course at some point in the AFC playoff picture to play one another.
I remember most of us, maybe all of us, thought that was the case last season when we saw that incredible divisional round game between these two teams, maybe the best playoff game ever. And then here's Cincinnati coming in the back door and then upsetting Kansas City on their way to the Super Bowl. Might there be maybe a Dolphins team this season that feels like they could be the Cincinnati Bengals of last season because they would be hosting in the divisional round the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson?
I think so. And you also, I mean, it's still hot here in South Florida. You know that? I mean, it's still, you can get a hot day, humid day, even in January when the playoffs would be taking advantage. And you could take advantage of that as a home team, and you're conditioning in it every single day. I think this team does feel very similar to the Bengals of last year, except their defense probably might be a little bit better. But they've got more weapons. I know you got Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins. It was a pretty nice crew of wide receivers. But this mix of weapons that Tua's working with are scary, scary good. I do think this game might live up to the billing, too, as far as Lamar Jackson versus Tua, a couple young quarterbacks coming into their own. So I would have to favor that. It feels real chalky with all of these, but I would go with the Dolphins as well, saying they would get through this round as kind of this team's offense is really taking the NFL by storm. And even, we already saw this matchup, right? We saw what happened when the Ravens blew that 28-point lead. I think the Dolphins would have the advantage of not going down that much. They would start right from scratch and take over this game offensively.
I've got a different reason for why I've got Miami winning this one. But let's not forget, too, I mean, Baltimore dominated that game until the fourth quarter where Miami was able to score 28 points to outright win it. And that's what really started, I think, some of the momentum about how good Tua can be this season. In fact, I think if we look at the rest of the season and where it's headed, we could probably look back to that single game as the moment that maybe we started looking at all the pieces combined with Mike McDaniels, Tyreek Hill, and Tua Tagovailoa and started to take this team pretty seriously. So I'll give the Dolphins the benefit of the doubt. This game would have to be played in Miami. And so I think that plays a little bit of a factor there, too, even though it would be a homecoming for Lamar Jackson. But for me, it's more about Kansas City taking on Miami in the AFC Championship game and Tyreek Hill being able to go back against a team that apparently didn't want to pay him. And so now you get to see the fireworks between the Kansas City Chiefs offense without Tyreek Hill and the Dolphins and with Tyreek Hill.
Well, let's go there, Brady. It would be the top-seeded Chiefs against the second-seeded Miami Dolphins as we pick the AFC postseason here as if it ended today. What do you think about that matchup?
Well, I think it's one that you still see the Kansas City Chiefs winning. Bottom line is that they're just the complete team. I do have some concerns about the Dolphins giving up some plays in the passing game, obviously to an offense like the Kansas City Chiefs, all the different weapons they have. I mean, Kadarius Toney joins this crew and he's just getting started. Yeah, he's fixing his gloves while he's jumping up and catching passes out of the air. He's just one of their many weapons. So tough to stop for a Dolphins defense that has had its moments this year, but for the most part has struggled. And one of the reasons why I needed to go get a player like Bradley Chubb. And on the flip side, I think Andy Reid knows how to eliminate Tyreek Hill from the equation. Not that the Dolphins don't have other weapons and not a ton of speed, but this is a much improved defense with Steve Spagnuolo. So I think the Chiefs get this one done and they move on to the Super Bowl.
Do you know, Chris, the last time the Dolphins were in the Super Bowl, I was there as a fan in San Francisco, Dan Marino versus Joe Montana, and that was Dan Marino's only Super Bowl appearance.
Never got back.
I would love to say this is the year they get back. Yeah.
How old were you?
Probably 11. Yeah,
Man.
He was a little kid. And I'd love to see him get back. I think they're still a year away. And this is one of those things where, again, growing up as a Dolphins fan, do you know how many times I watched this team travel north to Buffalo, travel somewhere cold, and get worked over because you are used to living in that warm weather. And all of a sudden it hits you like a ton of bricks and you're not used to having to work in those conditions and how to play football in those conditions. I think next year might be the year to get on the Dolphins bandwagon and say, all right, as a favorite where they could possibly have home field throughout, But to ask them to go in a cold environment where Kansas City, one of the coldest games I ever played there was on the Broncos, and I was a backup, and I remember doing just pat and go, and you could hardly feel your hands just getting warmed up for the game. I think that would significantly impact the Dolphins' offense, and where you've seen Patrick Mahomes and this Kansas City Chiefs do it time and time again, get it done. I think it'd be too much to ask for the Dolphins to go on the road and get it done in that environment. So chalk throughout here, but I'm not going to go against Patrick Mahomes.
This has been a fun exercise for all of us, but let's not forget two of the best quarterbacks and two of the teams that I think will eventually emerge in this playoff picture. And that is the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow, and that is the Los Angeles Chargers and Justin Herbert, especially when that team gets healthy, given all the injuries that they've sustained. They're still in that playoff picture. So I know we're going through this nice activity now. We've got everyone from the AFC East participating in the playoffs. I don't see this thing playing out this way. I'm just going to go ahead and throw that on the record right now. I still think you got two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL who we're not talking about that are going to be part of this conversation at the end of the season.
So I'm guessing you're knocking out the Jets and the Patriots and putting in the Chargers and Bengals. Is that right, Brady?
I mean, if there was two teams, that would probably be the two teams that you look at. Because I also think that's one of the things that gets exposed, whether it's overtime or in the playoffs. When you get into those moments, every fan thinks this: oh, the game's in overtime. Do we have the quarterback who's going to be able to win it? And I think that's the biggest question for both the Jets and Patriots. And if you're looking at the rest of these playoff teams, maybe with the exception of the Titans, maybe there's some questions about how they feel about Ryan Tannehill. But you still have a guy who's an MVP candidate in Derrick Henry, and you're going to put that ball in his back. And Tannehill has played well during the course of the regular season and in some spots where he has been able to step up. So a veteran like that, I have a little bit more appreciation for than not seeing it from a couple of other young guys who would be in that spot. So, yeah, I think Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert are going to be part of this conversation when it's all said and done.
I think the AFC South is open for business again. The Titans look like they were going to shore it up. Jeff Saturday takes over.
Man.
But more importantly than Jeff Saturday, he was able to go back to Matt Ryan. And even more importantly than that, Jonathan Taylor went off for 140 plus. That was the recipe for why they were the preseason favorite to win the division. Now that they get the ball rolling a little bit, they're going to run into a juggernaut this week against the Eagles. But that's not an AFC opponent. That's an NFC opponent. I think that team is still lurking around here in what could be one of the crazier stories we've seen in the NFL in 20 years.
I picked them to win the AFC South, and I'm not even on that bandwagon. Right? The Titans,
Watch out.
They're a much better football team right now. That was a good victory for the Colts, although I feel like there's probably some people out there who also feel like it was the Raiders, and the way the Raiders have given away games this year, it's tough.
He had Matt Ryan out there.
Yeah,
just
running
36-yard run. Let's go. All right. So it was an exercise, Brady. You're right. If the season ended today, we picked the AFC playoffs, and you guys both had the Chiefs coming out as the AFC champion. Inside the NFL, new episode tomorrow night, Tuesday night, 9:30 Eastern Time, exclusively on Paramount+.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.